Why are the verses of a Hindu mystic still recited at Muslim shrines in Kashmir? News out of Kashmir usually centers on border clashes and geopolitical tension. But an essay published on 30 July 2026 turns instead to the street corners of Srinagar, where people still buy small booklets of 14th century poetry. These verses belong to a long tradition of poet saints who blended Hindu and Islamic mysticism into a shared language. The history raises a quiet question about what gets erased when a place is only understood through its modern fault lines, leaving room for a culture built on religious overlap. Written by Peter Zidich, PhD candidate in religious studies, Harvard University, in The Conversation. Narrated for Arva. Kashmir remains one of the world's most contentious geopolitical flashpoints. In April 2025, India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed countries that share a tense border, came dangerously close to a major confrontation after militants attacked Indian tourists near the popular resort town of Pahalgam in Indian Kashmir. Against this backdrop, media coverage of Kashmir often focuses on violence and division. What is overlooked in this coverage is Kashmir's immense artistic, intellectual, and spiritual heritage, one shaped by centuries of interreligious and intercultural exchange. As a scholar of Sufism, traditions within Islam that emphasize inner transformation, love of God, and a personal connection to the divine, I have spent several years studying the Kashmiri mystic and poet Nund Rishi. Also known as Sheikh Nur-ud-Din Noorani, Nund Rishi lived from about 1378 to 1440. He founded the Rishi Sufi order, whose teachings emphasized simplicity, compassion, devotion to God, and care for others. The Rishi Sufis understood their tradition as both Islamic and deeply rooted in Kashmir's religious past. Their adoption of the Sanskrit word Rishi, meaning sage, reflected that connection with the region's Hindu spiritual past. Nund Rishi's poetry likewise draws on both Hindu and Islamic symbols and ideas. That legacy endures today. Kashmir, the valley of philosophy and poetry. Since the 3rd century BCE, Kashmir has been a center of learning and the arts for Hindus, Buddhists, and Muslims alike. Under the reign of Ashoka, an emperor who ruled from 304 to 232 BCE and played a pivotal role in spreading Buddhism across Asia, Kashmir became a major center of Buddhist learning. As royal patronage shifted in the 7th century, support for Buddhism declined, and Kashmir emerged as a center of Hindu literature and philosophy. Beginning in the 8th century, it also became an important hub for Shaivism, a major branch of Hinduism that worships Shiva as the supreme deity. Kashmir's Shaiva Hindu thinkers produced some of South Asia's most influential texts on consciousness. For example, the 9th century text The Spanda Karikas describes consciousness as spanda, or vibration, an active and dynamic force. In the 10th and early 11th centuries, the Hindu Shaiva scholar Abhinavagupta produced influential works on art, drama, and literature. He argued that poetry and theater transform emotions such as love, sorrow, and fear into rasa, a shared experience that audiences can appreciate without being overwhelmed by their own personal concerns. For Abhinavagupta, this temporary freedom from the individual self helped explain why beauty, awe, and wonder could become spiritually transformative. Nund Rishi was inspired by this rich legacy. While the Rishi Sufi tradition was not the only example of interreligious exchange, it became one of the region's most influential expressions of a shared spiritual culture. Poetry of a Hindu mystic. Kashmir gradually became a predominantly Muslim society after the Shah Mir dynasty came to power in the 14th century. Sufism was one of the main ways Islam spread in Kashmir, as Sufi teachers expressed Islamic teachings in terms that resonated with Hindu spiritual traditions and local culture. Nund Rishi was influenced in part by the 14th century Shaiva Hindu mystic and poet Lal Ded, one of Kashmir's most revered spiritual figures. Lal Ded became famous for her short spiritual poems called Vox, meaning speech or saying. These verses expressed complex religious ideas in simple, everyday Kashmiri. Lal Ded's poetry encouraged people to seek God within themselves, practice self-discipline, and recognized that spiritual truth could not be found through outward rituals alone. For example, one of her voks goes, "I was passionate, filled with longing. I searched far and wide, but the day that the truthful one found me, I was at home." In this vok, Lal Ded writes that what she sought far away was already present within her, expressing the idea that the divine can be found within oneself. Lal Ded's poetry also emphasized that the search for the divine transcends religious boundaries. For example, one of her voks goes, "Shiva abides in all that is, everywhere. Do not discriminate between a Hindu and a Muslim. If you are wise, know yourself. That is true knowledge of the Lord." Lal Ded writes that the divine can be found within oneself by Hindus and Muslims alike. Passed down orally for centuries, these voks became some of the earliest and most influential works of Kashmiri literature and were cherished by both Hindu and Muslim communities. Nund Rishi, a Sufi inspired by Hindu wisdom. Continuing Lal Ded's poetic legacy, Nund Rishi wrote short poems called shruks. These poems used images from ordinary life to warn against greed, religious hypocrisy, and an excessive attachment to worldly possessions. He strongly rejected caste divisions, a social hierarchy based on birth prevalent across South Asia. In one popular shruk, he wrote, "Caste is of no use in fancy gatherings. Caste is not written on one's face. Caste won't make your body parts impure. If you perform your duties, there is no caste." His poems also reflected on death, equality, and humanity's dependence on nature. At the time, Persian was the language of the royal court and literary culture. Nund Rishi, however, composed his teachings in Kashmiri, the language spoken by ordinary people. This made his spiritual lessons easier to understand, remember, and pass down. Nund Rishi also paid tribute to Lal Ded, also known as Lala, in one of his shruks. Here, he praises her spiritual wisdom and calls her an avatar, or an exceptionally holy and divinely inspired person. That Lala from Pampur drank divine nectar, cup after cup. She was a beloved avatar among us. O God, grant me her vision and knowledge. Even though Nund Rishi was a Muslim, he saw in the Hindu saint Lal Ded a model of spiritual attainment. Kashmir's interreligious traditions today. Nund Rishi's place of burial, Charari Sharif, remains a revered pilgrimage site for both Hindus and Muslims even today, and the poetry of both Lal Ded and Nund Rishi transcends religious boundaries and resonates with both communities. Small booklets of their poetry are sold on street corners across Srinagar, the capital of India's Jammu and Kashmir territory, and their verses are often recited at mushairas, or public poetry gatherings. During one visit to Khanqa Amola, a shrine in the heart of Srinagar dedicated to the revered 14th century Persian Sufi saint Mir Syed Ali Hamadani, I encountered a Muslim devotee moved to tears as he recited Lal Ded's verses. When I asked why he was reciting the poetry of a Hindu mystic at a Muslim shrine, he replied, "Lal Ded is our spiritual grandmother." How could I not honor her when I make this visit? This spirit continues to shape Kashmir's literary culture, which is shaped by the Rishi legacy of seeking wisdom across religious boundaries. This influence can be found in the works of contemporary Kashmiri poets and writers who continue to draw on Lal Ded, Nund Rishi, and other Rishi Sufi poets and saints. Mushaira gatherings and literary festivals also remain popular venues for sharing new poetry. In these gatherings, this shared literary tradition is celebrated across religious boundaries, revealing another side of life in the valley. Highlighting these lesser-known parts of Kashmir's history does not mean denying the region's geopolitical and socio-political challenges or romanticizing the past. Rather, the story of the Rishi Sufi order offers a counterpoint to the narratives of divisions that dominate discussions on Kashmir today.